We're live. Thank you very much.
Alright, guys, so welcome to the state. This is a podcast and vlog where we talk about state of the politics in South Africa and globally. And so today basically we'll be talking about the upcoming South African elections in South Africa, of course. And my name is Thapelo, and
Jacob.
so yeah, let's just dive straight into it.
Okay, so
Okay,
what's up?
so I just want to find out, like, what do you think about the upcoming elections? Like, who do you think is gonna win first?
Yeah, OTP. That's a big question. Who is going to win the elections? Off the bat, I would say the ANC has the best chances to win the election. So it's not certain. That's the one thing that we always have to keep up open in elections is the uncertainty principle. So the ANC has the best chances.
ANC. Okay, and then do you think okay, so from my observation, especially looking at like how EFF has been very influential, I see DA not making much impact as before. And what's your opinion of that? Do you think DA is gonna get less votes than before, or because of the EFF and of course the ANC always having a trust from its people?
Okay, so the one thing that you need to understand about the EFF's election campaign strategy, the DA's election campaign strategy, and the ANC's election campaign strategy is who is their target and their votes. So the reason why I'm saying it's the ANC most likely is going to win the election is because they're focusing largely on the large majority of poor people. So those are the people in South Africa who lives in townships and who are on a daily basis is at your domestic workers, your cleaners, the unemployed, people whose needs are housing, electricity, water, healthcare, education. Those are the ones that they really comes that's the ANC's voter base since 1994. The DA's one has been the middle class, whether it's white, whether it's black, whether it's colored, but the large majority part of the voting base is the middle class. And the reason why it's the middle class is because their policy, their manifestos speak about tax. It talks about corruption. It's about all of these things that matters for the middle class. And if you look at the EFF, they're speaking about the things that the old ANC Youth League speak about, and it's no secret. The ANC Youth League and the EFF, the old ANC Youth League and EFF, they are kind of the same leadership. So the EFF is still that radical voice that was within the ANC. So who are they attracting? So what they mostly attract is the black youth, the youth that know about the things that happened in the past and also can put things into perspective. Meaning, since 1994, has my life improved, or has my mother's or my family's life improved? So these students or these youngsters doesn't see improvement. So what the EFF is talking about, they are the ones that is most likely is being attracted by the EFF. So back to your question about the DA and the DA's chances then in election, is that the DA has hit a ceiling. So he hit a ceiling in the Western Cape and wherever. So there's not big inroads into the black voter base. The black voter base is the ANC in the EFF.
So if
that's 80 something percent of the population.
So if I get you correctly, then the DA doesn't stand a chance
Of winning the election now.
And then there's black first, land first.
Okay, so Andile Mthethana's party. Andile is a very interesting case because I think Andile is a career politician, and it's all about everything that I know about Andile is about Andile. So at one point it was in the PAC, and he didn't went to EFF Black Land First, but now he's in a party where he's in the leadership. So it becomes a personality-based party. But what are they saying different? Black first, land first. What are they saying different than the ANC or the EFF's policies on land? Nothing much.
Okay.
Or what do you think?
Okay, because with the little information that I have, I think I would say he's addressing things directly without even beating around the bush.
Like,
Well, specifically about the land question.
like,
I mean, he keeps on saying that they're here to. That's what they. I mean, they even say land or death. That's like their slogan, and I think he's actually much more upfront and actually to. I mean, we all know that there's inequality. We all can see what's happening, but I personally think other politicians of other parties, like those of the ANC and the EFF, well, Julius Malema also addresses things without beating around the bush, but I feel like Andile Mutama is the one who really, really, addresses what needs to be done.
like. The biggest thing in black first, land first is the idea of black. Is it because black or is it apartheid black? It's two different blacks.
Oh, I think it's because black. You mentioned it.
If it's because black, then in that because black, there is discrimination in because black. In terms of economics, in terms of land, in that particular conception of black. So the apartheid project was to put Indians further from coloureds and coloureds further from black people. So because black is when it comes to land distribution, then the question is who's going to get the biggest share in this amongst this racial groups? Is everyone going to get the same? So from an ideological point of view, that's the first thing that they have to resolve. Is who's black? Is it the apartheid black? The apartheid identity that, or is it because black? Once they have fixed that ideological point of view, then they can move further with a particular thing. So, but when it comes to the land question and the land reform process and the land expropriation without compensation, that's a discussion that's already on the table. And the question is, who is going to benefit from that particular bill that's on the table? That is the biggest question. So what are they saying that is new?
So basically.
So they're not saying anything new.
But what I see is that at least they are prioritizing that first. Like,
but you cannot also say is because black, because ideologically then if you include Indians in that. So originally Indian people is not from South Africa. So he's saying that Indian people was first here before white people. But that's a fallacy because most white people came here in 1652 and thereafter Indian came as slaves to KZN and also some in Cape Town. So who is your black? That's the biggest question you have to ask in the ideological section. You can't say it's because black, because then you cannot say black first, land first, meaning the blacks on the land was here first, so they need to get the land.
But isn't that what it was though? Like blacks being here first and then it was their land first.
But who's the black? Are you meaning the black that is created in apartheid? Meaning the Sotho, the Tswana, the Xhosa, the Zulu, those ethnic groups that apartheid created or colonialism created? Or are you including in that conception of black the Khoi and the San? Or are you excluding the Khoi and the San in that conception of black? Or are you putting Khoi and San under colored, which is also apartheid created identity? So that's the biggest issue that Andile Mqedana have to fix, and he knows about it because he's a learned guy. I've read many of his papers and many of his things. I even reference him in my book called Runaway Slave. He knows about these things. But like I'm saying is Andile Mqedana is always about himself. It's not about the majority. So it's a leadership, it's a personality issue. And that's why I created that party. It's about getting the attention. It's about getting into power, getting a voice, standing next to Julius, standing next to Ndlozi, Floyd. He wants to be mentioned with those people. And he wants to have that particular platform. So ideologically, and the issue of the land is already on the table.
Okay, and then these small parties like Hlaudi Motsoeneng has ACM, and also I have a question about like these small parties that come out like only when it's election time, because there's a lot of parties that I don't know actually personally, and I only see them when it's close to elections.
I think this election is the election with the most parties. Is the election with the it's kind of a record of the amount of parties that you have, the provincial and the national level. One thing that people need to know for this particular election is provincial and national elections. So a lot of people doesn't know it. They just think that they are voting. And in our system, you don't vote for president, you vote for the party. And parliament, in its first sitting, decides who's going to be the president. Then that member of parliament has to resign from parliament. And then that person becomes the president. What that means is that the president is never a member of parliament. Only for that first sitting, and thereafter gets elected, and then you have to resign. So parliament can hold you accountable because you're going to head up what the people call the executive. Now most people, when we think about the executive, then it's government. It's your national government, your provincial government, and your local government. So you are head, you're the political and figure and leader of that particular one. So you don't have much control. So when the president comes to parliament, what it does is a state of the nation address. That state of the nation address is actually him account to parliament what he did for a year as the leader of the executive. It's an accounting thing.
So the president is not like the member of parliament basically?
Never.
Okay.
Or in the South African system in particular.
Capitalism. I think capitalism is like something, from what I've learned, it's something that some Africans are against, imperialism. And of course we have the party with the purple cow face, the South African Capitalist Party. I checked their policies. I haven't read much into their, what they are about, but what's your opinion on them specifically? Because it's a capitalist party and they're actually advocating for capitalism in South Africa.
The biggest thing is who's going to vote for them.
Yeah,
Who is their voter base? Is it the poor? You think the poor, the majority of South Africa is poor? They're going to vote for capitalism or for capitalism. That thing that gives them poor. Or are they going to attract capitalists? Now, some of these smaller parties, they really do not build. You see, any upcoming party must have a slow build. The ANC got this far over a century. The EFF got this far because it was a breakaway. It was kind of internal politics within the ANC that led to the formation of the EFF. So they took a chunk of the ANC support. But the EFF also attracted PAC of support. All radical black parties into this thing that we call now economic freedom front fighters. The DA was previously the DP, but the DA was also NP. So they became the Democratic Alliance with after the 1999 elections. They became this Democratic Alliance. So it was DP and NP that kind of formed the Democratic Alliance because their support was waning. So at that point they largely attracted colored and white. But now there's more black people voting for it, but it's more the middle class. So that's the kind of politics that you see. These two parties, between the EFF and the DA, the party with the biggest chance of growing is the EFF because they attract the youth. And the youth is not going to vote for the ANC because the ANC Youth League and the ANC is dead. So the biggest party in the next 10 to 15 years to grow is the EFF. So they're growing their support. The middle class is not going to grow because of capitalism.
So basically that party is out there.
You don't have really big a middle class in capitalism.
Mm.
So the kind of capitalism we have in South Africa is the majority is poor, so that the small minority is rich. That's the capitalist system that we have here. So in a situation like this, your middle class doesn't grow. But if you go to a more social democratic state, is where there's more welfare and you limit and there's more tax on the rich, then your middle class growing. So if you have a growing middle class, then parties like the DA start thriving.
But then, if we look at all the parties, basically, they basically are capitalist parties at the end of the day. Then how are they?
The SCCP is not a capitalist party.
Okay, but let me
It's a South African Communist Party.
Let me rather specify, like the EFF, the ANC, obviously, they work under a system of capitalism. Then what's the difference? Aren't they also basically, as much as they're trying to help the poor and all of that, but wouldn't you say capitalism still affects the poor?
Okay, the capitalism, yes, affects the poor.
Mm.
But capitalism is also a system that intertwines with the state. So you see the kind of state that we have today, and shout out to the state, we are the state. The state, the government system that we have today is really intertwined with capitalism. Because policies like there needs to be economic growth takes more capitalist kind of stance, is that we don't interfere in the market, we allow for more market freedom, and through the market the economy grows, the government can tax, and what the tax then provide for the poor and those that is needed, but also for infrastructure to grow our capitalist society. So capitalism and the state and our policies and our laws is really intertwined. The South African Constitution is a kind of a hybrid between a capitalist and a socialist, because you really have certain rights in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, that gives specific rights to the poor.
Mm.
So there's an obligation from the state that you need to provide housing, you need to provide. But in other countries where it's purely capitalist, the state doesn't have that real obligation in terms of healthcare and any other thing.
But look at, like, I think recently there was like a lot of media coverage about how FNB I think it was FNB, yeah, how it has actually been basically robbing off mostly black people in terms of the charges that bank charges, and actually how white people have been advantaged more in terms of financial like decisions, or financial anything, like, how can I put it, like there was more financial advantage for white people. It was discovered that black people have actually been robbed to a certain extent, because there was more charges, and they weren't getting loans. Because I'm pointing out the effects of what capitalism is doing, especially.
Yeah, but you see in South Africa, the capitalist system in South Africa was also informed by racism.
Mm.
So first there was a colonial project, it's a capitalist project. So you use imperialism. Imperialism was this expansion of capitalism from Europe into the African colony. But imperialism had the own thing, is looking for new markets. So the African continent was the last market. Africa's economies, or the colonies' economies, wasn't grown. It was used for the extraction of raw materials, and that raw materials was processed in other parts of the world, especially Europe. And then those things were then the finished product came back to Africa and sold at a profit.
Mm.
So that's how imperialism works. So that's why after the colonies ended, there was no proper infrastructure. And that's why new independent colonies were still dependent largely on the colony. So then companies start taking over the production and the economies of these African countries, the new independent African countries. So many people call it new colonialism, where the capitalist company has a really control over the economy. So if you look at the Zimbabwean case of the land reform, is where the companies would draw their funds from the country, and the economy collapse. So you see, that is the effect. So imperialism worked in that particular way. So if you return to South Africa, it was always a capitalist project. colonialism and apartheid, but it's intertwined with race, where we discriminate against black people so white people can thrive off it. So then you have First National Bank, which is really a Afrikaner kind of institution, and really thrived during apartheid, whose policies is based on race. So the white people will benefit afterwards because in 1990, from 1994 or onwards, because those are the people, the businesses was the ones who started negotiating with the ANC in 85. It wasn't the apartheid state, it wasn't the politician who started negotiating first, it was the business who started. So that's why business and capitalism is protected in the South African constitution, because they started the whole process of we need a negotiated settlement. Because if we're not, then we're going to lose as white people in South Africa. Now the white people in South Africa call themselves Afrikaners, and even the English, they have a really strong bond with South Africa. They don't see them leaving. So some of them even call Heartland. So the only other option was to negotiate, because they don't see themselves leaving. So that's why the businesses wanted to stay and the people wanted to stay, so negotiated settlement had to take place. And that negotiated settlement was Section 25 of our Constitution.
I see.
Which is the right to private property.
Oh, I see.
That's where the land is protected. So everything, capitalism and everything, our state, how it functions, is under Section 25. Everything is there. That's the thing that black people were dispossessed. So okay, the natives of South Africa, and I mean natives, the people who were there in 1652. I don't care whether you're Khoi, also I don't care, but the people who were there in 1652 with land. From that point onwards, they were dispossessed. Systematically. Okay, we need to wrap up.
Okay.
Final question.
Okay, but this one is not more like geared towards the elections. It's more of a continental question actually. Like, do you think? Actually, in fact, I tweeted this question this morning. What do you think it will take for Africa to be fully independent and basically to be successful, or to be, to thrive on its own?
Okay.
Is it getting away with capitalism? Is it because I mean, I think, like, from what I'm seeing, there isn't any progress with regards to trying to negotiate with capitalists, with businesses, with colonialists. So what do you think it will take for this continent? Because I mean, there's so much poverty happening here, right? And I know poverty is another question, but what do you think it will take for the entire continent to be economically, successful and thrive?
Okay.
Like other continents, basically.
You see, all of the question you ask is an ideological question. So in most political systems or in most states, if you can resolve the ideological question and then build economic in a governmental system around it, then the people can buy into that particular idea. So the one thing that you said that we have to start is, you said, at what point can Africa be independent? So the first ideological question that we kind of in the continent have to resolve is independence. But with it is, do we see ourselves as a continent? Meaning it raises another ideological question as to who is the African on the African continent. When Africa, the name Africa, was never a reference to sub-Saharan Africa. It was the north during the times of the Roman Empire. Sub-Saharan Africa was seen as Ethiopia. So during those times, that's a skewed ideological process. So with colonialism, you see this idea of the African continent. But in today, when you speak about the African, then you speak about the black, phenotypical sub-Saharan African. The north of Africa see them as Arab. So continental-wide, there is not an African or the idea of an African. The second thing is, if there is no coherent idea of the African, how can you get to a level of independence? But when you say, okay, we resolve the issue around the African, now what is independence? Would we like to be independent like China, like Europe, with all of their issues, United States? What kind of independence? Our world system is of such a thing is that there is no true independence. States have to trade and operate with one another. The borders need to be open.
So are you saying like it's that there can't be an answer basically for that? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying it's a large project, but it starts with thinking first.
Yeah, of course.
Thinking together.
Yeah, but okay, that's it for just this episode, and let's catch us again next time. We'll be discussing more, breaking down some political things, of course, state of the society, not just in the country but continentally and globally as well. So see you again next time.
Peace out.
Sharp. How was it? You know, I didn't